Hi, my name is Clayton Bolton, and first of all, I'd like to thank you for ending the federal raids against medical marijuana patients like myself. I recently asked Rudy Giuliani and Mitt Romney about the subject, and instead of answering my questions, they turned their backs to me. I was wondering if you could tell me how you are a better candidate for the medical marijuana patients like myself.
I would absolutely never use the federal government to enforce a law against anybody using marijuana. There's a couple reasons for that. We talk about medical marijuana, and as a physician, it's controversial in conventional medicine. I happen to believe that it's probably very, very helpful, and I'll mention there's a few testimonials for that. But even in the legislative sense, in the political sense, the federal government doesn't have this authority. I mean, if a state especially comes in and says that you can use it, like some of these states have, then the federal government would come in and say that we are going to override the state law, even if it's just a modest legalization, and override this law. That's an offense on states' rights. But how can people do this? How can talk to like that and say, well, I'm a compassionate conservative. I want you to suffer. That's what they're saying. You know, it's outrageous. And they don't know the history. How long has this war on drugs been going on? Essentially since the early 70s. The first marijuana laws were passed in 1938, and they knew they weren't allowed to outlaw it, so they passed a huge tax on marijuana. And even the war on drugs total war on drugs is rather recent. You know, think of all the respect that they had for the Constitution in, I guess, 1919 when they wrote a prohibition against alcohol. They knew they had to change the Constitution. And then they repealed it because it didn't work. But all this drug war business is done without authority. It's sort of obvious that they don't have the authority to do this. We have probably spent $500 or more billion since the early 70s. What do we do with individuals? Let's say an individual that never committed a violent crime gets caught 3 times in a nonviolent act of using drugs, even if they were hard drugs and even if they hurt the individual, they can be put in prison for life. At the same time, we have murderers and rapists and child molesters getting back out on the street. Who was it today that was just released after 35 years? Shot somebody who was famous. And anyway, Wallace, he attempted to kill him. But he gets out, he's back out on the streets. But yet they will put mandatory sentences. Our prisons are flooded with non-violent criminals. We treat people who aren't drug addicts as criminals. Do we treat all alcoholics as criminals? Oh no. Politicians drink alcohol. They're not going to do that.
According to the United States Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, false claims of any kind of cure without FDA trials carries a 5 to 40-year federal prison sentence. Therefore, the following film is a work of pure fiction. Or is it? Journal entry, July 15, 2009. I find it an odd moment in my life. We grow the cure for cancer in 4 or 5 rooms in our house in the Denver ghetto. Yet I smoke wretched bowls of resin and ashes from a bong too dirty to ever be clean again. Please God, legalize this plant. I know we can save the planet. I grow what can save the planet. But for now, I work at a truck stop serving the master on my $8.25 an hour. God, I feel rich.
A reefer smoker.
This is the first magazine we saw with information from a man named Rick Simson in Canada. Mr. Simson had released a method of taking cannabis, marijuana, pot, weed, whatever you want to call it, and refining it to its essential oils, and ingesting it or eating it instead of smoking. The results he got from doing so were amazing, and he reported over 1,500 cancer patients had been cured by doing this. We knew that if Rick Simson was telling the truth, the information must be released, tested and proven, but then surely marijuana would be legalized based on its ability to cure and prevent cancer. But it had to be proven first. Conveniently, we were growers, and using our medicine, we began producing what Rick Simson called Phoenix Tears. This is my uncle. He's 60 years old and the youngest brother to my mom. I would receive a call from him in November that he has a disease the doctors are calling cancer, but they can't figure out where and what kind, and his T-cell count is up above 80, and the doctor's best plan is to wait for the cancer to get worse so they can find it and treat it with radiation chemotherapy. Meanwhile, we have just begun making the Phoenix Tears medication, and my uncle has days where he has no strength in his body and can't lift up his motorcycle to go for a ride. His quality of life is diminishing rapidly, and the best medical science has to offer is a wait and radiate approach. I inform my uncle about Rick Simson's Phoenix Tears, what we have begun calling the cure. My uncle had always been the lone member of my ultra-Republican family to be pro-cannabis legalization, even though he himself was not a daily user. He decides to look at Rick Simson's information, and after watching Run from the Cure, begin our cure treatment instead of impending chemotherapy.
Yeah, we got a question for Jello.
Okay.
What do you think about marijuana and hemp prohibition in this country?
Well, it works about as well as alcohol prohibition. And one way to undercut our insane drug laws, which are primarily to enrich the military or the prison industrial complex, any sitting governor or the president with a stroke of a pen could commute the sentences of all small-time drug offenders who were not selling, didn't commit a firearm crime or whatever, commute them all the time served and let them out tomorrow.
Woo! This is Kevin Grimsinger. He's an 18-year veteran of the Army Rangers, where he served in multiple theaters as an Army Ranger Spec Op medic. In Afghanistan, while engaged with the Taliban looking for Osama bin Laden, he stepped on an American-planted landmine left over from our support of bin Laden and others during their fight against the Soviet Union invasion in the 1980s. Kevin lost both his legs to that landmine and sustained numerous other impact injuries. Once back in the U.S., Kevin began using medical marijuana almost immediately upon release from the hospital. The medical marijuana helped him to deal with the side effects of the numerous opiate medications he was on to cope with pain from the loss of his legs, broken bones, and paralysis from slightly below the heart down. It was a much different life for Kevin, and the THC aided him both physically and mentally, and he began speaking out on behalf of other veterans who he knew could be using medical marijuana for their post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, amongst other ailments stemming from the emotional strains of war. Kevin is a friend of ours, and looks at Rick Simpson's information when we begin producing it. He decides he would like to try the oil as well, to see what it does for him. With a bunch of patients now taking the cure pills, we take our dosing method to the next level. Using a gun ammunition scale, we weigh out the oil to 1/10 of a gram. The first class of pills we call the treatment class, or T class. These are the T1 and T2 pills. Everyone starts on the T class of pills to become accustomed to the oil before moving on. The next class of pills is the cure class. A C1 pill has 3 drops of the oil, or 0.0625 grams of the oil. A C2 pill has 0.125 grams, a C3 0.1875 grams, a C4 has 1/4 a gram, and the Big Daddy, the Super C, has a full ½ gram of the Simpson's oil inside. By putting exact amounts into pills, we can accurately gauge the results of the medication. But back to my uncle and Kevin. They, along with 100 plus more brave souls, begin a small human experiment using the oil, treating all sorts of ailments and diseases. Astonishing results come quickly. After 3 weeks on the treatment class pills, my uncle reports his T-cell count has gone down from above 70 to under 60. Kevin reports being able to sleep at night and pain relief. A glaucoma patient substitutes our pills for his $600 a month eye drops and reports no need for his prescriptions after 1 month of the use of our pills. Certain patients decide to up their dose to the cure level of pills. My uncle has a doctor's appointment. He calls me thrilled. His T-cell count is down to 40, and he is starting to feel better. He can use the restroom normally, his pain is gone, and he feels younger. He alone decides to finish his treatment and begins Super C pills. A month after doing so, I get an amazing phone call. My uncle has a doctor's appointment with his cancer specialist to see how his carcinoid tumor is doing. The results are a miracle. The cancer is gone. The results are a miracle. The cancer is gone. His T-cell count is down to normal, acceptable levels. His cancer specialist cannot believe it. His regular doctor cannot believe it. As if this wasn't enough, Kevin Grimsinger brings us another modern medical miracle. After upping his dose to the cure level pills, Kevin begins to experience feeling again in areas below his paralysis line. Let me put that another way. In the parts of his body that medical doctors had said he would never feel again, Kevin now has sensation and can recognize touch, hot and cold, and breezes blowing by. We learn the oil has regenerative properties. What can this stuff not do? What can this stuff not do? What can this stuff not do?